Today, I sit down with John Chiang. John was on the California Board of Equalization. He was a state controller. He was the state treasurer, and he ran for governor in California in 2018. And he's currently a fellow at the USC Center for the Political Future. And John has a really unique story as a Taiwanese American whose upbringing and whose family story plays a large role in the way he operates as a political figure and as a public servant. Somebody who understands how issues are tied together and how they all are interwoven into the economy. And we're going to dive into all of that today. So really fascinating interview here, and I can't wait for you to watch it. John, thank you very much for coming on the Common Ally Chronicles. I appreciate you being here.
Excited to be with you.
Great. I am going to have you introduce yourself so everyone knows your background and a little bit about who you are.
Okay, so I am the oldest child of parents who immigrated in the 1950s from Taiwan before you had a larger immigration swell from the Asian countries. They came to this country with not much. My dad, 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, worked really hard, pursued higher education, ultimately got his PhD in chemical engineering from Case Western. My mom got her hands and knees and paid for, her English lessons at what was then what called a junior college in South Dakota. So the humble roots, but had parents with big dreams who believed in America, and they shared that with their kids.
Yeah, and that's I'm assuming that background too, with all that you do with like building an inclusive America. I would imagine that role in your upbringing plays a big role in what you're trying to see out of this country now.
Yeah, you're on all 4 corners. I was born in the early 1960s, saw a little bit of the civil rights struggle, our families faced it itself. We were the first Asian family in our community in suburban Chicago, faced incredible hostility and discrimination. And I remember as a child, 6, 7, my early impressions in life, it was painful to be excluded, to be treated separately, be called racial epithets, chink, gook, Jap. I like to joke that they didn't even get the ethnicity correct. Like they didn't know how to hurl the insults. But my mom was incredibly resilient. She was tough. She felt a lot of the pain. And as I grew older, it's like, why should my mom and dad, who are good, decent, humble people, face that ignominy because people are shallow, that don't have a good heart, don't look to the best in each other. And certainly when you have that type of heart, when you have that type of thinking, you're not going to elevate America. And we were witnessing today, you need good people prevailing over those who are more parochial, those who are more backwards thinking.
Yeah, and you touched on a lot of things I want to get into, especially like where we are now as opposed to what you just described, and if we're any better off than we were then. And also understanding like that ignorance element is key, right? I think it's not just that they don't know, it's that they're scared to explore. And I think that, with your work in early education and education as a whole, I think that plays a role, by defunding education, by keeping people in these bubbles. And what happens in a lot of small towns in the country is that's your environment. That's kind of all you know. So if all you see are the same faces, then you are ignorant to other cultures. You have to kind of challenge yourself to leave that, right? So I think there's a lot of things that play there. But I want to take a deeper dive on that. But I do want to talk about, so you ran for governor, you were the state treasurer, and you handled trillions of dollars. Right. So I just want to dive into that for a little bit. But first of all, for some people out there, can you just give us a for dummies version of what a state treasurer does and how unique that is in California?
Sure, absolutely. So the state treasurer is in essence the state's banker. So in the treasurer's office during my tenure, we processed about $2 trillion with a T in transactions, so incredibly large, handled the short-term investment portfolio. So think of asset managers. So we would have anywhere from $65 to $90 billion a day in the state's coffers between state and local government. They handled the actual banking transactions. So for instance, Wells Fargo engaged in some horrible practices. They I wasn't trying to go after them. They're a California bank that employs a lot of people. But when you're going after immigrants, when you're going after women, when you're creating these fake accounts and you're assessing fees against the most vulnerable, we're as a state government, we're one of its largest partners. And I had to say, until you act better, right, you don't deserve the business of the people of the state of California. Sat on a whole bunch of boards and authorities. I led the building of new and rehabilitated housing through our tax credits, increased those percentages by massive amounts, more efficient use of the money, and then sat on the state pension authorities, CalPERS and CalSTRS. CalPERS, most people don't know, is either the second or third largest healthcare purchaser in the United States. So, what practices can you engage in? Because when you think of, outside of housing, healthcare is the largest expenditure for a lot of families. It unfortunately bankrupted too many families. And so how do we improve that in America? So I was trying to get, one of the nation's largest healthcare purchasers to engage in better transparency, better negotiation practice so we can protect our members, but also to set a standard for others to follow.
Yeah, and that connectivity is also something, right? Like I'm very interested in, obviously your role is around economics, right? But I think what people don't understand is how these issues actually touch one another. So when you're talking about economics, you're talking about housing, you're talking about education, you're talking about homelessness, you're talking about all of these other issues that actually are playing a role in how the economy will play out. How do you kind of communicate that to the average person so they understand that the economy is not this like separate thing just floating around in thin air?
I'm talking about the very core of their life. Uh, the Everybody needs a place to call home.
Mhm.
You need shelter against the elements. You need safety and security. That's the healthcare. That's the job, right? And so what I was fundamentally focused, right, even though it's a lot of numbers, sounds like a lot of foreign economic principles. And it's incredibly complicated. And then the some of the most intelligent and the wealthiest you are using these algorithms, which have made it more distant than the ordinary citizen. Right? I've tried to bring and try to simplify a lot of that and just make it work at a basic level. As I pointed out, my parents came to this country with very little. And so it's like, how do you get a job so that you can pay off student loans, that you can pay for that apartment? If my dad could have bought that fourth shirt or that third pair of pants, how do you put my mom on her hands and knees trying to save right? Here's a story. My mom, as a child, wouldn't let us, or when we were children, wouldn't let us eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches,
Mm.
even though my brother and I loved peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, because my mom said that's the cheapest thing on the menu, and she ate a lot of them. She goes, my kids aren't going to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And we said, Mom, there's a difference. We like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. We're not compelled because it's the cheapest thing on the menu to
Yeah.
eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, right? So basically, you're giving people dignity and decency, and basically the affirmation of respect and love that fellow human beings should be afforded.
Yeah, it's really well put. I feel like you're a rarity too. Like I feel like that genuine love and thoughtfulness and kindness, it has driven you throughout your life and has played a role in how you've it sounds like you've reformed the state's economy as well. And like this is what is it? It's the sixth largest economy in the world, right? California on its own. Like
We
so,
actually bumped up a little bit. We've been
really?
fifth for a couple of years, for a few
Wow.
years. Yeah,
Awesome. All right.
yeah.
Well, I'd like to that I would imagine that you play a role in that. Um, but like I do think it takes that. Like I pointed out because I think especially in like banking, right? In economics, we think about this as like a stale industry where people are kind of robotic and removed from that human element. So I think to be able to be that high up, right? To be able to pull strings that affect people's daily lives and still have compassion and think about policy and decision making through that lens. I do think that's rare. Um, but I kind of want to ask you about that. Is the concept of a public servant dead? Is the concept of compassion and policy making gone? I would like to think not. I think what we see when we turn on the TV, it would be hard to make a case against that. But what's your take on that?
No, I think there's I think there's hundreds of thousands of deeply caring, passionate public servants. We need to encourage them. We need public leadership to rebuild the structures. A lot of America's organization, both in the public and private sectors, are outdated. So we will build massive infrastructure around a single program that may be outdated. How do we give our public servants more meaningful opportunities at workplaces that are fulfilling, and for many of them to change the lives of others, right? When you box them in, when you don't have creative thinking, when you don't give them, you don't trust their judgment, a lot of lost opportunities happen between the possible connections between a public servant and the people they're supposed to serve. I've been incredibly blessed. Luckily, I was by the good fortune of the people of California to be able to serve in offices. So one of them was the Board of Equalization. It's California's elected tax authority. So when I was there, one of the things I created is all these educational tax programs, because I know how intimidating the tax code is for the average person in America.
Everybody. Yeah.
Right. When you're talking about millions of words, everybody makes a mistake. Everybody makes a mistake, right? They'll give tests to CPAs as to doing tax exams, like an 8 of 10 will do them wrong, right? Even so, those who've been professionally certified still make mistakes. One of the things that really impacted me is I watched how California's left $2 billion with the federal government each year because our lower middle income and lower income workers didn't take advantage of their earned income tax credit. So here you have good, decent people, Californians working, who don't understand this tax provision, and they're leaving much needed money behind. So one of the things I told my staff, if you're going to work for me, you have to be tax trained. And so one of my favorite things during my Board of Equalization and Controller days is from early January to April 15th, we were doing free taxes. And then I just loved to walk into the office because I would see people of colors, especially moms who were taking care of their kids. And, multiple times a week, I would see those moms crying, right? Because they found money to help relieve the stress they were feeling. We didn't have enough money to pay the electricity bill. We didn't have money for food. We didn't have money for rent. A lot of my staff felt really empowered. Those who were fearful, I said, you have to overcome your fear, right? Because these are taxes, right? You're not doing, you're not doing depreciation schedules, right? You're not doing foreign income. We're helping good people with basic taxes. So you can overcome any fears you may have. And when they watched others and when they heard the other stories from their colleagues, right, they got pretty excited.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine. No, it's a maze. I think a lot of people too, they see their tax dollars not being spent appropriately, right? You see things in your own community where like our streets are a mess. There's homelessness and everything. There's this, there's that. It's like, I'm paying tax. I'm working my butt off. Where is it going? Right. I think that's one element. But I want to ask a question around that. But before that, you had mentioned like, you got to hear people out. You have to have creativity around these issues, think about these things in a different light. And before I lose that thought, I do think that is the inclusiveness element there, and having equity in the workplace and having people in these rooms that represent a multitude of communities around the country is really important. Is that kind of what you were implying there, or am I off on that?
Yeah, I can't believe America's having this debate about the value of people.
I know.
Right, America used to be the inspiration from people all across the globe. You can leave a country where you're struggling, come to America, and it's not going to be easy. Nothing's promised to you, but an opportunity. Yeah. But America used to be great at elevating people who would come to this country and give them great opportunities, not just to have a middle-class life, some would get wealthy, but to make a meaningful contribution in each other's lives. And today we're arguing, unfortunately, the highest levels, whether white supremacy is good or bad. Right? Whether immigrants are of value, whether people who are Muslim should be able to come to this country. We're better than that, and so I hope the good-willed people that are supporters of your efforts here to educate and inspire future generations of Americans stand tall, stand up versus right, instead of some people saying, stand back and stand by. We want the right people to stand up and march forward to build the best America that our past generations. Let's make our grandparents and earlier generations of Americans proud of where we're taking this country.
Yeah, I agree. I firmly believe that it's a very vocal minority who are having that conversation and challenging whether white supremacy is right or not. I don't think most people are. I think most people have realized that that's a ridiculous conversation, and it should be left in the past, and that we should be learning from that, obviously. But I don't think that is a majority mindset of this country. I just think that they've kind of stolen the platform and stolen the microphone. So, and I think we're seeing that play out. I think there was a referendum against that in 2018. I think there is people standing up and fighting for what's right. So let's hope that that is correct.
Exactly.
Back to the taxes here, just quickly. There's a couple things there too, like, with the transparency. Is there a way, and maybe this is make believe, but is there a way to have some sort of trackable system? Is it that our institutions are just not, they haven't kept pace with the private sector, where government moves slowly, technology isn't really woven in completely yet to governmental systems? Um, is there something where it's done on smart contracts, or where taxes can be done in a way where people can actually see where their money's going in real time? Because I would imagine that gives people pride in the system that they're paying into, right? Like, I don't see taxes as the big bad wolf. I see it as helping my daughter's school and helping, my community. So I think it's a good thing. The problem is, once it goes out of my check, I have no idea what happened. So is there any way that there can be something like that?
Yeah, you're spot on, right? One of the things, if we want to continue to ask Californians and Americans to invest, you point to it. Let's show that we're transparent. Let's show it's accountable, and that give them an opportunity to understand how we could spend their tax dollars wisely. There was an idea by a former Republican Assembly member out of Carlsbad a few years ago. To try to do that, the cost of doing that would have been $1 billion. But cost of technology is dropping, right? If we improve the efficiencies and the effectiveness of our process, we can certainly do it. California is pushing forward with a fiscal program that gets closer to that. It's not perfect, but it's something I deeply encourage. I was trying to do it not only for expenditures, and so I was a huge proponent of transparency. In fact, I had Gabe Pettick speak at my USC class on Friday. Gabe used to be the Standard & Poor's analyst for the state of California. And when I became the controller of the state of California, one of the things I did is I started issuing a monthly cash report. I wanted to, first of all, as a principal, empower the people of the state of California as to the finances, right? Because whoever has the information has the power, right? And so when you had politicians or a few others controlling that information, and others were operating in the dark, right? They could shift money to their benefit to the detriment of others who ought to be participating in the process. So I would say, this is how much we collect this month. This is how much we spent. This is how much we had in cash reserve for the state, right? And it had there was, in July of 2007, I put out information that was shocking to people, right? I said, California is operating in a cash deficit. Nobody expected California to be in deficit, right? The budget projections had us a surplus, but it demonstrated, right, we were entering that housing crisis and other things.
Before the crash, then.
Yeah, it's foretold, hey, we need to work on this immediately before things get bad, right? Because it has a huge impact. I remember during that financial crisis, there was this one healthcare operator out of Fresno, and she would call me weekly, right? Because she was concerned. She would help people who needed the oxygen tanks and other healthcare services. She would provide the transportation services, and she was afraid because she had lived through another recession where the state not paying timely. And she said, "How are we doing?" And I said, "Right." And unfortunately, as things went on, I said, it's looking worse and worse.
Wow. That's so, and to that point too, like being involved with like helping California out of financial crisis, um, I mean, that's got to be a monumental task. I mean, you're talking about kind of foreseeing that happening, and then it happens. We're in it. How do you come in and clean that up? And what kind of like um, corruption and like what did you uncover to help kind of find some of those ways to get us right back on track?
Yeah, so I had the big battles with Governor Schwarzenegger, right? And some of them, a lot of people said, "Hey, John's just being political, taking on the governor." I said, my job's not to take on the governor. In fact, in my last meeting with Governor Schwarzenegger, I felt sorry for the governor. I said, "Governor, I wasn't trying to be difficult with you, right? But I have to do my job. Right, as the controller, I'm the state's cash manager. I pay the bills. So when I was the controller, we did 44 million payments, disbursements each month. And it's a felony for the controller to write a bounce check.
Mm.
So we kept like a $2.5 billion reserve, right? Because your money could go in and out very quickly. And I wanted to keep California's debt from going into junk bond status, right? Because if it goes into junk bond status, a lot of the people who own California's debt has to sell it, right? And you don't want, let's say you're like we saw with the housing crisis, you don't want $100 asset to turn into a $5 asset.
Yeah.
You lose all this value. So face huge political battles. At the end of the day, California got through it painfully. One of the things I had terrific staff. I just had I always wanted to recognize the extraordinary staff that I had, very passionate, caring people. Sometimes we had 1 a.m. staff meetings just to talk about cash and how we were trying to get through the next day in the state of California. But there's all these special funds. So it's like, in essence, going through your couch to see if there's any loose change, checking to see if you have any unclaimed property. And so there's these special funds, and we comb through the nearly 1,000 special funds to see if there is more any available cash to get us through those difficult times.
Wow.
But then ultimately I had to issue IOUs to keep California afloat.
And now with the new recession and with COVID and with everything else, are we back in that place? I mean, where are we at now compared to that?
No, thankfully we had strong leadership by the governor and legislature and others. We built a rainy day fund. We all understand, and this is a black mark in America, and it happens to other countries. We have too much wealth inequality. And fortunately, we're witnessing today, the billionaires are getting wealthier during this recession. And after we lost they call it the stimulus, where people are getting additional money, the lower income folks and a lot of the working folks, right, and it got cut off, they're creeping deeper into greater financial challenges. So we obviously have to close that gap and build a strong fundamental foundation. It ties back to what you pointed out earlier about my work. How do you make sure people get food, they get a job, they get a house, and they have health care?
Yep.
Right? You build that during the good times to make sure that there is a strong foundation for the difficult times such as that we are in today.
Yeah, and I'm seeing that a lot in the healthcare sector. We talked with John Backus from LA Care, and we've been talking to other people who are like leaders of industry who are taking it from that perspective as well. And some of the people at Ultimed, and their approaches are very similar, where it's like healthcare has to be a long-term play. We have to start looking at this as, John had made this great. He was talking about this anecdote basically, where it's like this guy kept coming into the ER with like healthcare issues and respiratory issues, and they realized it was because he didn't have an air conditioner in his unit, and that could have saved, millions of dollars to the state. This poor guy could have gotten on his life along a lot earlier. So then they look at, well, how do we get him an air conditioner? And like just environmental things, right? Of like helping people in a more normal way than just always thinking about this from like top down. So yeah, I think that's a smart approach, and I think we need to do that more holistically, and like that has to be kind of injected into all of our major systems throughout government.
Yeah,
Um,
perfectly pointed out. Our incentives in the American healthcare system are wrong. Right, as we continue to go heavily dependent on an employer-based healthcare system, and when you have fee for service, right, fee for service, you're not encouraging the healthcare practitioners to drive down costs, right? If
Yeah.
they're going to get paid more, they'll have to offer more services, oftentimes not necessarily, the ones that should be offered.
Yeah.
I'm on a board of directors of a publicly traded company that's focused on the managed care group, right? We get a set fee based on a risk model. And our job is, if we want to make money, to make sure that patient is healthy, right? And we'll have instances where some of our doctors, like the good old days when I was younger, before you were born, doctors would do home visits, right? To
Yeah.
make sure that the patients were getting treated.
Yep.
We need that type of care, individualized attention to help drive down costs.
Yeah, I agree. I want to ask one more question about taxes, and then we'll get off of that. But and where are we here? I think we're doing good on time. The the question about, you had mentioned, like your staff and other people who came into the office who didn't realize they can take advantage of this tax code, right? Where they can get more money than they thought they had. What is the cat and mouse game kind of there and remains there? Because if everyone did take advantage, we would be in a worse economic situation because people are getting more money? Or is it just like, because I don't understand why these things aren't just automatically applied. Like, why do we have to keep going through these ropes? Is that to keep an industry alive that helps us with our taxes? Like, what's the reason that this isn't just automated? Like,
Yeah. Spot on. So actually, I have a student. And we didn't plan this, right? So
no.
your comments are incredible. So I have a incredibly bright USC student who, with her professor, wrote a paper on tax reform. And one of the issues she brought up involved me. Right, she didn't know it was me, but it was California preparing ready returns. So we would pre-populate forms with the information we had about taxpayers. And I wanted to add on to stuff for right. One of the simple things I wasn't trying to add, which I supported, but I didn't push for, was like a calculator function. But into it, the big tax software company was opposed to it. And they were opposed to the state doing these pre-populated forms because the private sector wanted to earn the money, right? And so that goes back to the public versus private debate. We're saying we're not doing people's tax returns. We are pre-populating what information we have that they could use, right? And if they wanted our assistance, right, they're already paying for us. We should provide that assistance. But the states and the federal government's not really doing the full tax return. But they didn't want the state participating in it at all. In fact, one of the big things that I was going after into it was I wanted free filing. And Intuit was pushing for taxpayers to pay to use their services for filing. Right now, they were offering some of it for free, and to be fair, right, but a lot of it they didn't. And so when I ran for controller, they put $1 million campaign contribution in support of my opponent because they wanted to terminate my support of that program. And credit to the former controller, Steve Wesley. Steve Wesley and I were two of the three votes. There were three votes. Two of us said we're opposed to what Intuit was trying to do in this particular case. And so, unfortunately, when you look at some of the most powerful committees, it includes the House Ways and Means Committee, the tax oriented committees. It happens in local states, and when there's a lot of money being sloshed around, unfortunately, what's in the best interests, what's in the common good, especially for those who are starting behind the eight ball, they stay behind the eight ball because public policy isn't advancing the best public programs in average Californian and average Americans' interests.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we share that same vision. Yeah, and I think that ties back to what you said about we need more public servants, and we need people who aren't tied to big industry and who aren't really tied to lobbyists. And I do, and I'm not like tying myself to a tree. Like, I do understand a lot of these things do have to exist, and that is a part of society. Like, I'm trying to understand all of it, right? But I do think that if government is going to be an effective government for the people, which as a representative democracy it should, I think that we need more people in that understand that have that ethos and that want to fight for that, because that's the only way to overpower those interests. Because you talk about money and power, and even people who don't think they want it, once they have it, they don't want to let it go, right? So I think you have to start with a new crop of people who just don't have that kind of tainted past, but that's for another day. Um, so this week we're dedicating most of our content to the environment. We're basically dedicating a week to an issue, and we're having a bunch of content around that up until the election. Obviously, we'll carry that after the election, but this week is the environment. It's the number one issue our audience cares about. I think a lot of people, but especially a younger audience, this is the number one issue. Um, so I know you were involved with the Green Bond Pledge. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, and also just your take on the environment and and climate, and just where, again, the economy is so important to this argument, because we've worked with young conservatives on this too, and they're all about saving the environment, but they want to do it in a way that has economics built into it, right? So uh, what is your take on that? How do we solve the climate change crisis without tanking the economy? Which I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. I think you can actually have both. But what is your take on that?
Yeah, the modern GOP should have listened to the old GOP, right? When you think about
Yeah.
constitutionalism, right, you think about President Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt. A lot of those efforts were spurred
Mhm.
by some forward-thinking Republicans way back when, understanding our national parks, understanding the incredible bounty. Right, if we're going to flourish, you can't have contaminated lands. It's not good for the health. And right back to the economics, you have poor lands, right? You don't have economic productivity, you don't have social and political cohesiveness and productivity. So you need all of those things. It's been a core area of passion for me for a long period of time. I used to look at logging practices at the Board of Equalization because we were responsible for timber tax. The I'll get to the green bonds. One of the efforts that I spearheaded the a long while ago, right? And you're seeing a lot of it is, and California's reinforcing that. I try to change not only the leadership in America's public sector. Try to change the faces and hearts and spirit and thinking of America's private sector leadership.
Mhm.
So when I was on the board of CalPERS and CalSTRS in 2007 or 2008, excuse me, I said, hey, we need more people of color, right? This country is very diverse and we compete in a global economy. So if we want to take advantage of world opportunities, if we want to make America's corporations more profitable and give them more opportunities to hire more people from more communities, let's capture that opportunities. Other countries are coming into the United States, right? And we're so parochial. We're shutting down like four other continents or five other continents, right? The other countries have figured that out.
Yep.
They spend a lot of time with economic development personnel in other regions of the world. We don't do as much, right? Some of our larger corporations do it, but others don't. If we were smart about that, we could hire more people, give them middle-class jobs in communities throughout the United States of America. And that certainly includes, so I said, we need more people of color. Then I said, we need more women on corporate boards. I said, we need more people from the LGBTQIA community. And I see we need more individuals who have risk expertise, especially climate change risk expertise, right? And frankly, finally, right, the near the end of my term, not exactly end, right, but a few years before, you had, even though CalPERS and CalSTRS had been pushing it for a while, you had other larger corporations starting to recognize it. And so that's part of how I try to push it, to get corporations to act upon it, to hire people, to finance it. And part of it was like, as you mentioned, me pushing green bonds, green financing. Because people would say, hey, there's no benefit to financing, through debt, climate change improvement practices. I said, if there's no cost to it, if there's no harm to it, why wouldn't you do it, right? And when you're thinking that there's going to be trillions of dollars of transfer in wealth between grandparents and parents to the kids that you're talking about today who are passionate and rightfully so,
Yep.
and need to assume the mantle of that leadership sooner than the current generation, because they will help fix the health of our planet. Let's do everything we can. And so I did like a national tour, and because my national tour pushing on it, I was invited to participate in Italy at the Rockefeller Center sponsored event, pushing it. And actually, I think in my first year in office, I went to Prince Charles's house They were convening the P8, eight of the largest pension plans across the world, talking about what we can do in regards to using pension monies
Huh.
to clean and fix and green the health of the world economy and and our globe.
Wow. What happened from that?
So they started building. They started building that partnership. There's greater discussion. The Europeans were ahead of the Americans, but the Americans were accelerating efforts until the current administration. So they that's it's not only that issue, right? But under President Trump, we changed our foreign policy. We went to an American first policy, and unfortunately, we see a lot of our European and Asian and African allies saying, America is no longer a dependable partner, not only for international security, but on other types of issues, whether it's financial issues or whether it's environmental issues. And I'm not saying environmental issue is not an international security issue. It is the international security issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, America first, maybe in the 1700s was a good idea, but it's hard once you're kind of tied to globalization, and that's how the global economy, does affect us. I understand of wanting to take care of, your nation first, but I think we could do that through these practices, and I think it's that misconnection, that playing on a global stage and that realizing this is something that doesn't have borders, is the first step, right? But I also think talking about the environment, I think from a local level is the only way to really do it, because it's so big, people don't want to grasp that. It's almost like dealing with mortality, right? Like, I don't want to know what happens. Like, I'm out of this. Like, I think it's the same thing with the environment. It's like, how the hell am I going to stop climate change? Like, forget it. Instead of, oh, well, I can do this locally and I can work with my local legislation and I can figure out this and that. I think that's going to be the way, but we have to have that coming out of the mouthpiece of everybody who has a platform, and it's just
Yeah.
not there yet.
You're very articulate about it. And you're absolutely persuasive. Right, for the longest of times, Americans per capita were the largest polluter. So when
Yeah,
they say, you can't do anything about it, it's like, hey, if we're the largest per capita polluter, you can control your own life.
yep,
Right, and part of this is, and others have criticized, why should we do anything? Because the Americans, who are the largest per capita polluter, they aren't willing to own their own actions. So we need to own it so that we can send a signal if we want others that, yes, we recognize that we are improving, but others who are growing their economy, like the Chinese and and others, they said, we're improving, we need you to improve with us. We recognize we're imperfect.
yeah, yeah. Well, here's the hoping once again, right? We'll see. um, okay, well, I think that's about time. I have a couple other just quick questions. One is kind of about Common Ally, right? We are obviously built on the ethos that we are all allies and we have more in common than not. Um, and being nonpartisan does not mean that we don't stand up for people and that we're silent. It just means that we we have no party, because that's how we get things done, right? We're able to work with other people, and like I said earlier, younger generations really live by that. So, what does being a common ally mean to you?
It's looking at the best, looking for the best in each other, understanding that we're human, so we have foibles, uh, offering our support when we can, and affording everybody kindness and respect, and understand as a human being, you're entitled to dignity and decency.
I love that. Also, we ask everybody, what would you like to plug when they come on here to try to get, and you said kindness, and that was awesome. There's always some link or something which 100% we want to support, but it was really nice to just see kindness on that line. So thank you. And the last question is, what advice do you have to young leaders out there? And I just want to preface that by saying, like, I've always referred to Gen Z and millennials to some extent as the future leaders. And it was someone within that community who corrected me and said, no, 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 we're leaders now. Like, and that was just so powerful. It's like, oh my God, that's right. Like all the movements, all the involvement, just they are leaders now. They are also future leaders. So I would love to hear from someone who is also a great leader. What is your advice to young people?
So a couple of points. I've been too serious through this interview, and I wish I added more levity. But if you have another breath in your life, you have the power to affect somebody else. So this is sort of sad, but this is what inspires me. And just thinking. So when I was elected to the Board of Equalization, and then the first week I took office, so I took office. I just said thank you to my mom, right? Unfortunately, my dad had left this good earth. And I said, thank you for all your sacrifices to give me the opportunity to run for office and to try to help on a full-time basis fellow Californians. That week, at the end of that week, my sister was kidnapped and then she was murdered. Her body was found 3 months later. My sister, she was given these posthumous awards. Her friends at Smith and Georgetown started scholarships after her name, because my sister was the very best person I knew at connecting and staying in touch with people, right? So she tried to be uplifting, encouraging, just a great friend. And then she also wanted to be an immigration judge. She worked for Congressman Howard Berman and then worked for the INS, right? Fighting for a lot of people who were having difficulties coming to this country and staying in this country. And she was young. She passed away when she was 28. So I was saying, it doesn't matter how young you are. If you have that attitude, if you have that approach, and you have that will and resilience, you can create greatness, especially in lives of others. And then one friend has on their website, started after their kid who has autism, a quote, and I don't know the name of the person, to the world you may be one person, but to that one person, you may be their world. So understand the impact that you can have.
Wow. First of all, I'm really sorry. I didn't know that. And my condolences about that. But that is one of the most beautiful send-offs I've had in any of these. And it's really, I hope people are listening to that, because I preach that all the time as a father of five, a 5-year-old, not 5 kids. It's definitely
One more siblings.
yeah, I would be much more aged than I already am. But there's something to that where, a great part of my life was just wanting to accomplish so many things and wanting to help others, but really not understanding that the only thing with like value in that golden ticket is time. And everything I do is to buy myself more time, because that's all we have, right? Like at the end of the day, that's literally it. So I think you said that way better than I ever could. So thank you.
Well, Godspeed to you and Godspeed to all.
Thanks, John.